All right. So then day 3, they announced probably the most exciting announcement, I think, is Sora general availability. So again, by way of context, ChatGPT traditionally has been about text. You put text in, you get text out. DALL-E was about images. You put text in, you get images out. And they've integrated DALL-E into ChatGPT, so you can ask ChatGPT for images. And then they previewed quite a while ago now this thing called Sora, which is text to video. You put some text in, and it will generate short but very realistic videos for you. That was only available to certain people, creatives and a small group of beta testers, and everybody was kind of chomping at the bit to get their hands on this thing. They have now announced it's generally available, although at the day of announcement, it was really hard to get into it. They were not expecting signups. And they've announced a whole bunch of features on top, kind of an authoring environment with storyboarding and the ability to modify the images, the videos that get rendered and so on. It's damn cool. It's damn cool. I mean, it's visual, it's beautiful, it's compelling. It's not perfect. Arms and limbs go different places. I think object permanence is a problem, but this is version 1 of something that is going to become more and more miraculous and incredible over time. Hooman, you've seen this, obviously. You've played with it. I've played with it. What do you make of this incredible video production capability?
So I think first and foremost, like you, we should take a step back as human beings and just be in awe of the fact that the computer has the creativity to generate not just the quality of the images, but like the uniqueness of the images. It was a really, really interesting tool. To your point, they also have deficits, right? There's a lot of memes I'm sure you've seen on X and other platforms with like the gymnast who's doing twirling and like their body parts are kind of twirling instead of their actual body. So we're in the early days, but the rate of change in AI is so fast. And so I expect that they'll have more there. I think the other thing is the model's extensible, right? And so there are other applications. They have a plugin infrastructure and framework so that you can build video driven, image driven applications, the way that you want to. I think that's super interesting. I'd say like 2 industry level observations that they've impacted. We talked about earlier that like they're humanizing their brand and doing it through Christmas. And I think it's smart that they released this during that period of time, but they did pull a bit of a Microsoft move. And it's like, if I'm Pika and all these other, foundational models on video, I'm worried. I'm worried because these guys have the mind share. These guys have the distribution channels direct to consumer, and these guys most certainly have the access to capital. And so I wonder if this is almost like a Netscape moment for some of those companies that are working really hard. So I would say that's one insight. And then the second, I think there's a massive, massive change in the creative industry. And, if I were, maybe in a different position now and not fully devoted to collective, man, there's new generations of Pixars that can be built. You can work with OpenAI to start generating scripts and riff on them on different, research and whatnot. But now you can actually start storyboarding, maybe even creating light, video and whatnot. But at some point, if you see the logical end to this, like there could be a person who's like a 1-person studio who's putting out these miraculous, awesome stories with music and everything. So like we're getting to this point. I think I mentioned like on one of the previous episodes, this $1 billion business one. Well, it's not just tech businesses. We can see the revival of media in some ways. If you are an effective storyteller who knows how to use these tools, now maybe you're not 1 person, you're 5, but Pixar had to have like hundreds of people building rendering technology and all these other things. You can see a world where like people are mass producing things that, at this point, it's like, if you're not good at story and orchestration, that's the skill set at this point, right?
So this podcast was the one that popularized the idea of $1 billion company with 3 people, thanks to ChatGPT. Ben Parr said that, very, very shortly after the ChatGPT moment, and Jeremiah wrote it and posted it on LinkedIn. It got 1 million views, and it's been cited everywhere. And I think you almost declared it concisely there, Hooman. I think we can declare there will be $1 billion movie with 1 creator, right? There'll be a director, whatever you want to call them, right? One creative force generating a movie that will generate at the box office $1 billion. That's going to happen, I think. Is it one year, 1 decade? I don't know, but it's going to happen somewhere in there. And so I think it's a very, very exciting future. A couple of other things to note that Sora points to. The first is there are extended features if you have ChatGPT Pro. So they announced the tier on day one, and on day three, they're adding more capabilities to the tier. And so here you get faster generations, more generations, higher resolution generations if you're a ChatGPT Pro subscriber. The other thing it points to is that there's a new UX, right? So I've long said that chat has real limitations. It is not the end state for AI. It is an important metaphor, interaction model for AI, but it's not the final one or the only one. And here you can see a lot more UX around the generation of these videos. There's a feed. There is buttons to remix and change resolutions. There's storyboarding feature where you can add keyframes. This is much, much more visual, a way to interact with a model, which is appropriate because it's a visual output. But I think this will be true for text-based input, image-based input, and all sorts of things. And in fact, the day 4 announcements, Canvas also points to this, and we'll touch more on that when we get there. And the last thing I think it's worth noting is, I tried using it yesterday. I still struggle with it, right? Like there's this level of precision that you get from a Figma or from a Final Cut Pro, or from grabbing a camera and pointing it at something, where you can really control exactly where the camera is and what it's doing. And if you're highly opinionated about what you want to see, it's hard. It's only version 1, but it's hard to get precisely what you want generated from the model. I'm sure with a lot more prompting and a lot more work and a lot more investment, and more features to be released and more iterations to be released, it'll get better and better and better. But right now, if you are deeply opinionated about the vision you want to see on the screen, it's not the right thing for you. But that'll change, and it's going to be really fun to see it evolve.
To your point, we're in like this early days of AI. And I think when people think of AI, I would say like a lay consumer, they've been acculturated and acclimated to this notion of text, like a conversation. And the kind of pattern that I'll use to remind folks is like, do you remember when conversational, all these agents, everyone was like thinking conversation was the way to go. Everyone was to move to text, right?
Yeah, conversational commerce was one of the taglines. Yeah.
And a lot of VC-backed companies came after us. Everyone's going to move to conversation. Like no one's going to want to go to UIs. Well, it turns out if you're looking at things like it's like when you call United Airlines or an airline and there's a choice, when you're operating in voice, you're operating serially. You only go as fast as you can hear voice. Similarly speaking, text is serial, right? And so if you want to introduce parallelism, we also have eyes. So when I look at a visual interface, I can take in more information. I can do more things. And so I think this concept of generative interfaces, where right now OpenAI is kind of doing this, they're providing an interface with Sora, right? That's fixed. But over time, you could even imagine that they're like, oh, well, what are you trying to do, Chris? Well, you're like, oh, well, I'm trying to edit a commercial. Okay. They might generate a different interface versus, hey, I'm just making a video for school. Right.
That's right.
And they will render components. They will suggest components. You can say, hey, you know what? This is too basic for me. Move me up into a more advanced mode. And then the interface can re-render because you have tools like Canvas, or you have this concept where you can run scripts. Like I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but there's a method to the madness here. I feel like they're preparing themselves for this mode where you can execute live code. And if ChatGPT writes that code and also can execute it live, they become a very different, the interface possibilities are just so outstanding.
Yeah, I agree. There's firstly, people lack a lot of creativity. Most people, most of the time, if you give them a blank blinking input box, they have no earthly idea what to do with it. None. Right. And so, buttons and options and what have you really guide the creative process and help people to get to an outcome. The other thing to keep in mind is traditional UX, buttons and lists and, grids and what have you. They're extremely high bandwidth interaction models. There's a lot of information being communicated on that screen just intuitively because of the information hierarchy and relationships between labels that you don't need to describe, right? It's the difference between paragraphs of narrative versus bullet points versus just diagrams. And so we don't want to lose all of that high bandwidth communication coming back from the computer for bunches of use cases, as you just said. creative use cases, shopping use cases, what have you, navigation use cases, etc. And so, yeah, and what you just pointed to, I love. I've been talking about this for months and months. The LLM will generate UX on the fly, and you see it doing this already with like flight options and search results and stuff. And so there'll be pre-canned interfaces like Sora's creative UX right now, and there'll be kind of dynamically generated UXs on the fly to help you do a task. And then finally, I think, ironically, where text or conversation will be the most valuable, I think will be with voice. So you're walking around. I just watched Her again yesterday. You're walking around, and that's when you don't want to use your eyes, and you're just doing stuff, and you just want to have a conversation to get stuff done as a personal assistant. I think that's when conversation will really see its best use cases.
Yeah, I think that for the voice side, what the transformer models are not good at is real-time voice processing. And we still
Yes.
don't have a really nice way of doing that. I think what will really take voice into the mainstream and start ushering in this next generation of AI interfaces is once you can do that real-time processing of voice and move away from the server-based interaction where you're serializing.
Well, advanced voice is doing that. I mean, if have you played with ChatGPT Advanced Voice?
But I'm saying, like, if it gets out into applications and it's everywhere and it's getting faster and faster and faster,
Oh, right.
that's the thing. Like, I always use this example. Like, I'm sitting there on Yelp and I have to go, if I want to go find a restaurant with my wife, I'll like, first I'll talk to her. I'll be like, well, what do you want? She's like, well, look at Japanese. Well, oh, it's not around here. And it's this. So if I had a conversation, there are pauses in the conversation. Can you find Japanese? And then while it's re-rendering your face, oh, wait, but can you do local? Oh, wait, but can you, I'll 15-minute drive. And there's natural pauses where the computer will have time to adjust interface. And so as you're having this kind of broken conversation with the interface, it can adjust to the optimal listing results. You can do it for travel. You can do it for searching for restaurants. You can do like you pick. But again, I think the input to everything has to move to real time on voice. And then you move to real time interface generation and you're like, whoa, forget about it. This is like game changing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they also demoed voice with camera. So, I'm
Yeah.
wearing the Meta Ray-Ban glasses if you're watching on YouTube. If you can, the battery life is the main problem here, I think. But if you could wire up real-time video and real-time voice, the power of that is incredible. For me, using advanced voice, the biggest problem is actually not the ability to interrupt it or any of that stuff. It's that it gets interrupted too much. So if you're in a busy cafe, or if it hears itself, it actually stops and like goes, "Oh, I'm sorry," and it's like recalculates what it's saying, and it's like, "Oh my god," for just keep going. So it ironically it needs to the problem with interruption is that you need to is discernment. You need to know when a piece of audio, some sound, is an interruption, and when it's just background noise or a distraction. Very exciting times to come for that.